Our correspondent Charles Jackal, who is rejoining us after a stint at the Betty Ford Clinic, kicks off our team coverage. Chuck, it's great to have you back.
Here's my theory on movies.
Do you want me to tell you?
You lose!
Oh, hi there. My name is Prostetnik Vogon Jeffs, and in this video, I'm talking about Canada. Wait, hold on a sec. Come on, I promise it'll be a fun time. And besides, it's not really Canada I'm talking about, but rather the 1995 Michael Moore...
That's it! We're leaving, kids! Come on!
Bro, okay, come on, seriously? You're just gonna leave because... Listen, I don't like the guy either. His career fell victim to his political derangement and he became absolutely insufferable. But again, it's not really Michael Moore we're talking about here.
You mean it?
No, we're taking a look at his remarkably and unintentionally prophetic 1995 satirical comedy, Canadian Bacon.
Now! Who's with me?
I'm not trying to get political. In fact, in most of these videos, I'm doing everything I can to avoid politics with varying amounts of success.
I'll tell you what I think, but you won't like it.
But unless you've been living under a rock, or you're watching this several years from now and need some context, Canada and the United States of America are currently in a trade war. A tariff tussle, if you will. More accurately, the United States and the Trump administration are currently in a trade war with the whole world. But as a Canadian, I'm obviously going to be more attuned to the Canada-USA relationship. Anyway, the long and short of this is that it seemed like an opportune time to revisit one of my favorite movies from the 90s. I'll be completely upfront about it, it's not a great movie when it comes to story structure or character development or anything like that. It's one of my favorites, but I'll be the first to acknowledge that it's primarily because of the Canadiana.
Play Snowbird! That's what I hate about coming here, you know? You gotta listen to that song all the time.
The nostalgia and love I used to have for this country I call home. But what it lacks in some of the more technical aspects of its production, it makes up for in the casting and joke department. If you're a fan of SCTV and Strange Brew and, hell, John Candy, well, you probably love or are going to love this movie in some capacity. And sure, a lot of the jokes will only resonate with Canadians of a certain age or Americans with an obscure fascination in their northern neighbors, but to everyone else, I would still encourage a viewing, if only to see how freakishly relevant this movie has become.
It's time we put America back in North America!
Oh, Christ.
No? Still not convinced? Okay. Cue the recap. We start things off by dropping in on a presidential visit to Niagara Falls, New York, better known to Canadians as the ugly side of the falls. Settle down, you know it's true. The president is visiting to appeal to the voters of a town being decimated by the closing of weapon manufacturing plants. To be specific, the closing of Hacker Dynamics. A number of former employees have been protesting by jumping off of Niagara Falls.
The city council has just approved an incentive program. Sheriff's deputies who actually managed to talk someone out of jumping will be getting $25. If they have to go and retrieve the body, they'll be getting $50.
Jump! Jump!
Man, are we racking up that grief bonus?
Which is where we meet former Hacker employee Roy Boy. John Candy's Sheriff Bud Boomer, along with his deputy and girlfriend, Rhea Perlman's honey, are also former Hacker employees. They save Roy, a friend and former coworker, by shooting him with what appears to be a tranq dart. Could be a regular gun, I'm not too sure. And I don't really get the whole duct tape thing here. A lot of this doesn't make any sense.
I was trying to make a statement about our plight.
Okay. Later, at a Hacker Dynamics weapon auction, Boomer, Honey, and Roy meet up with their friend Cabral Jabbar. And let's pause for a second. I'm going to give Moore the benefit of the doubt here. There are dozens of jokes throughout the movie about Cabral being black.
How come you never see any black guys playing hockey, huh?
Brothers are starting to figure out this ice thing. Hope you enjoyed it.
So I'm going to assume it was completely intentional that the only black character in the story is being used to highlight how other black characters are often used as a plot device to...
Just don't start with me, all right? It's not because you're black, all right? Lots of black guys.
Give me an example.
It seems somewhat out of place in the movie. I'll touch on that a little bit later.
Never saw a white one that size.
But it's not like any of the other characters are particularly well developed. I suppose it might have been more of an issue had that been the case. Nah, we'll just leave it as an observation for now.
Can we all just get along?
Though I will say that it does feel like a precursor to the current state of race relations in North America.
All these guns and white people are making me nervous.
Will you ease off with that white people stuff? You got me looking at him funny.
Back at the auction, Roy Boy buys a rocket launcher, and G.D. Spradlin saunters in and is all like,
"Give me that microphone. I reckon all of you know me. If you don't, I'm R.J. Hacker and I own Hacker Dynamics."
He sympathizes with the laid-off workers and blames the current president's anti-war policies for the market downturn. Speaking of the president, he finally shows up at the auction and gets a super warm welcome from Hacker and the crowd.
Here he is now. The man that a thin majority of you chose to be president of the United States.
The president doesn't want to go around starting wars for no reason.
How about a little credit? I'm the only president who hasn't gotten us into a war.
I think that's his point, sir.
Nobody's bothering us. Guaranteed 30-point boost in the poll. I'm not going to start a war just to increase my popularity.
He believes the children are the future, which has not been doing his approval rating any favors. In the middle of his speech, Roy's rocket discharges prematurely, and Boomer jumps in to save the president. The next day, recovering from the accidental attempt on his life, the president gets good news from Kevin Pollak's national security advisor, Stuart Smiley.
Immediately after the assassination attempt, we got a 15-point boost in the national polls. Of course, they dropped off considerably once word got out that you were still alive.
What this administration needs is a war. Something that will appease the military-industrial complex and boost the president's poll numbers. So, a meeting is arranged with Russian President Vladimir Krushkin. But he's not interested in a war.
I'm so sorry, Mr. President. We can't go back to the old days.
He's interested in bringing his country into the 21st century.
Please try and understand. Good day.
Just a trick, Mr. President.
Yeah, right.
And we're back to square one. Rip Torn's General Dick Panzer offers up some options.
What could be a bigger threat than aliens invading from space?
Jesus, is this the best you could come up with?
None of them good. The whole thing is so ridiculous that the president jokingly suggests they start a war with Canada.
How about Canada?
Meanwhile, Boomer and Honey and Cabral and Roy head across the border to watch a hockey game in Ontario. During the game, Boomer dumps on Canadian beer.
I'll tell you another thing, the beer sucks.
And a fight breaks out. While being escorted out of the arena, Boomer doubles down and starts a riot.
All I said was Canadian beer sucks.
Giving Stuart an idea.
Boy, these Canadians are violent.
He reaches out to Gus, a CIA operative assigned to monitor Canuck shenanigans.
These Canadians suffer from a serious inferiority complex. That's why they built this.
This is hilarious.
They're just Canadians. Yeah, they're practically the 51st state.
I know that Moore's intent here was to poke fun at the people who would equate Canada's socialist policies to communism.
Their entire government is run by socialists.
Yeah, but it's not the real pinko stuff, Gus.
No, that's where you're wrong.
God, he had such a hard-on for Canada back in the 90s. But it's incredible how relevant this scene feels today.
Capitalism must be destroyed in all forms. What the hell is this?
What the hell is this? It's Canada in the mid-2020s. The president doesn't buy into the plan initially. Stuart reminds him that the will of the people is easily manipulated.
The American people will buy whatever we tell them to. You know that.
He's convinced he can get the American people to turn on Canada in record time.
Give me 1 week and I'll have Americans burning maple leaves so fast they won't have time to think about their smog-filled lungs, rising interest rates, or their dwindling savings accounts.
A media blitz floods the airwaves with anti-hoser propaganda.
Think of your children pledging allegiance to the maple leaf. Mayonnaise on everything. Winter, 11 months of the year.
Spreading fear into every household. Boomer and his friends buy the spin, hook, line, and sinker.
We have to get everyone organized.
He rallies the members of his community to prepare for war. Checkpoints are set up, guns are distributed, and a local militia is formed. And the president, looking for a way to jumpstart a Cold War, initiates a covert operation, led by Gus, to infiltrate and sabotage a hydroelectric plant while pretending to be Canadians.
We'll get some special ops, we'll disguise them as Canadians, and we'll let them blow something up.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, Gus and his crew are caught by Boomer and company. The result is still the same. heighten tensions between the United States and Canada. But the fake incursion also validates Boomer's fears. Honey goes all close encounters and starts sculpting giant dongs, and the crew decides to sneak across the border to
kick some Canadian butt.
Litter on Canadian land.
Are you sure we're in Canada?
You smell anything?
No.
Exactly. Canada!
This joke made way more sense 30 years ago when we took an obscene amount of pride in the cleanliness of our streets. Anyway, some Mounties show up out of nowhere and the gang freaks out, racing back to their boat and hightailing it out of there. But to their shock, they've accidentally left Honey behind. Soon after, she becomes a national figure, a hostage of the Canadian regime.
Sources in the intelligence community speculate that Canada may be preparing to terminate her, which would certainly be in keeping with what we know about the Canadians.
Fearing for her life, Boomer and the boys sneak into a Canadian power plant looking to sabotage the headquarters of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
I'm gonna ask you one more time. Where is the power switch to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police headquarters? You're gonna tell me sooner or later.
The Canadians refuse to help, and Boomer inadvertently shuts off power for the entire country. They head to RCMP headquarters and get the drop on Stephen Wright's lone Mountie.
Welcome to Canada.
He's not at all interested in the confrontation.
Have some fudge. Just leave me alone.
And he has no idea what Boomer and his friends are after.
I don't know what you're talking about. Hey.
About. I don't hear it. All I hear is about, but all you guys hear is a boot. A boot.
It's about what we're talking about.
About a boot.
You're gonna learn how to talk right, understand?
We got ways of making you pronounce the letter O.
Whatever. It turns out that Honey isn't there. She was taken to the capital.
The capital, Toronto.
No. The capital of Canada is Ottawa.
Ottawa.
No, it's true. The capital of Canada is Ottawa, not Toronto. Honey was taken to Ottawa for a free mental health assessment, but that doesn't convince Boomer and the boys, and they head off to Toronto. Back in America, the president learns of Boomer's actions, which have inspired others to take up arms against Canada. Fearing the start of a hot war, the president allows Stewart to send Omega Force, an elite group of soldiers, to eliminate Boomer. Unaware of his pursuers, Boomer and his buds steal a garbage truck after defacing it. Unfortunately, this catches the attention of faux PP officer Aykroyd.
May I see your license and registration, please?
Who happens to be a real stickler for cultural representation.
If you wish to avoid prosecution, I would advise that you comply with our language laws.
Wait, hold on a second. Canucks are hot dog. My French is rusty as but shouldn't that be something like Les Canucks sont de la viande de chien? Screw it. Canucks are totally hot dog. Now, one of the plot lines I've failed to mention up until now is the Stewart and Hacker relationship. Why haven't I mentioned it? Well, because it's convoluted and poorly developed throughout the story. If I had tried to explain it chronologically, it would have had the same effect as it does in this movie, which is that of confusion. So I'm going to sum it up here for the sake of clarity. Stewart and Hacker have a long-standing relationship. It's implied that Hacker is responsible for Stewart's position within the administration. Hacker also developed a software program called Hacker Hellstorm.
The Hacker Hellstorm is a devastating weapon,
which allows the controller to activate missile defense systems across America. Stewart, unaware of its true purpose, sold the Hacker Hellstorm to Canada as a weather-related device. It's located at the top of the CN Tower in Toronto. But Hacker himself retains control over the software.
The Canadians cannot launch any missiles.
No.
Only I can, because I have the codes.
And he intends on using it to blackmail the president for
$1 million.
$1 million isn't exactly a lot of money these days.
He intends on using it to blackmail the president for $1 trillion in order to recoup his previous financial losses. Back in Ottawa, Honey wakes up in the hospital and is greeted by candy stripers who inform her,
"Our universal healthcare system has determined that you don't actually need a doctor until
2006.
The funniest part of this is that for years, Canada has been seen as this bastion of quality healthcare. Evidence that socialized healthcare is the solution that everyone needs. And maybe it is. I'm not going to get into that here. But what I find amusing is that Canadian Bacon presents this like our hospitals are futuristic facilities capable of predicting when you'll need attention, when in reality we have a much more dystopian landscape.
Gordon Lightfoot. Ew. Ottawa.
It's more like, hey, we don't have enough doctors or equipment to service your condition, so we're gonna book you an appointment with someone in about 1.5 to 2 years, okay? Cool? Cool. Hope you don't die before then. Anyway, Honey ties up the candy stripers and escapes the hospital. She heads out to Toronto and miraculously gets there before Boomer and the boys. And I think this is probably the most subtle joke of the whole movie. I don't even know if it was intentional, but it's low-key hilarity. The trip from Ottawa to Toronto is 4 hours long. From Niagara Falls to Toronto is less than 2 hours. But we've got Boomer and crew eating beans by a campfire at night, an entire day after leaving Niagara Falls. I mean, it's incredible. It's awesome. It's a great joke. Right, well, Hacker initiates the Hacker Hellstorm software.
Our missile silos in southern Utah have somehow become activated.
And missile silos across the United States prepare to send their explosive payloads straight into Russia, because no one bothered changing targets after the Cold War ended. As Hacker waits for the president to cave to his demands,
No, it's insane.
It's business.
Stewart realizes what's going on and confronts the senile old man.
Give me the money and then I'll turn it off.
Give me the goddamn code.
He steals the codes and punches Hacker, sending him one story down to his death. Which makes sense, the guy's like 90. I'm sure every bone in his body shattered upon impact. Stewart tries to tell everyone he has the codes, but is quickly arrested for, murdering an old man in front of everybody. The Hacker Hellstorm timer counts down and global thermonuclear war appears imminent.
Nuke the slimy Canuck bastards, will wipe their frigid goddamn country off the map.
Boomer abandons Cabral and Roy for no reason whatsoever. The Omega Force is a failure, and the president pleads with Canadian Prime Minister Clark MacDonald to abort the launch.
Fermez les raquettes, okay?
Things are looking bad.
About 2 years in high school and about 4 years in college. Well, thank you.
But luckily, Honey overhears the Hacker Hellstorm countdown to destruction and shoots the shit out of it. Honey and Boomer leave the tower and steal an ambulance. They make their way to Lake Ontario and hop in a boat to head home.
Home.
And then we get a bunch of these stupid "where are they now" clips in lieu of a proper conclusion. And hold on. Did they actually cast Wallace Shawn for this? Jesus, I'm hoping this was a stock clip that they were able to purchase or something like that. The idea that someone would hire Wallace Shawn in such a perfect role and then only use these few seconds at the end of the movie, well, that's fucking
Inconceivable.
And again, that's some unintentionally prescient stuff. The whole ruling with an iron fist thing, is priceless. If you know, you know. Let's talk about the good and the bad of Canadian bacon. Now, we all know that's not real bacon. We're talking about the movie here. First off, the cast. John Candy, Alan Alda, Kevin Pollak, Rhea Perlman, Rip Torn, Bill Nunn, Stephen Wright, Brad Sullivan, Dan Aykroyd. Absolutely incredible. What a great lineup. It's such a top-notch cast that it almost covers up the underwhelming script and amateurish production values.
Oh, that's good.
My only complaint, as mentioned previously, is that Wallace Shawn isn't really in the movie.
That's bullshit. This is a Canadian trick.
Oh, what I would have given to see him as the Prime Minister in a verbal tiff with President Alda. And despite a huge number of political misfires, there's still enough satire here to feel relevant. Sure, the context of a lot of it has changed. New inferences can be made from certain references. The jokes have morphed. But the overall depiction of corrupt governments in bed with the weapons industry, desperate for war profits, and a population easily controlled by propaganda remains extremely poignant.
Well, you could take that a couple of ways,
Lastly, it's a film about Canada. Well, not about Canada, not a boot Canada. Should I just go all in here? Well, not a boot Canada, but it plays a major role. And it's got 4. Now that can't be right. Only 4 of the actors are Canadian? And one of them was a generic Mountie? Oh, God. Okay, well, at least a good chunk of it was filmed in Ontario.
Sportsman's paradise.
That's something, eh? And now for the bad. The editing. It's awful. There are sequences that feel incomplete. There are clear errors with a few of the cuts. It's nothing so horrendous you can't watch it, but it gives a rushed and cheap feel to the whole production. Couple that with the unimaginative cinematography and things get a bit dicier.
I'm sorry. I'm appalled.
It's clear that Moore doesn't have an eye for the artistic, which probably explains his foray into blunt force political documentaries. The majority of shots in the film are unbalanced or jarring to look at. Again, not so bad that you laugh at it. The camera work isn't that distracting. It's just the framing. It's uninspired, and it just clearly was not Moore's focus. And finally, the lack of focus. There's a unique and interesting story here. The premise the movie is based on is solid. An orchestrated war between the United States and Canada. So much potential, but it's squandered here because Moore couldn't narrow his focus on one or two themes. He's trying to cram in condemnations for the military-industrial complex, government corruption, nepotism, racism, and a slew of other themes. It's too much for a short comedy that would rather joke about Canadian stereotypes than deal with the underpinning motifs.
All right, now how did you know that was a nuclear facility?
Well, they tricked us on that one. That's a hospital.
Ah well, let's check in on those review scores and see where folks are sitting with this one. Yeah, that tomato meter critic score is a little harsh. I think the audience score nailed it on this one though. It's a 5 out of 10. I could see a 4 or a 6 depending on your familiarity with Canada. Like I said, it's not a great movie. And this feels like another perfect time to reiterate that movies don't have to be good for you to enjoy them. I honestly love this movie, and I don't really give a shit what anyone thinks about it. I have the same opinion about movies like Strange Brew.
That was a cool movie.
Which is another horrendous Canadian production that I love dearly. It's an awful movie by numerous metrics, but the sum of its parts, the nostalgia, and the mind-blowing insanity of it all elevate it into the cultural zeitgeist, or at least the Canadian zeitgeist.
There is no Canadian culture. I've never read any Canadian literature.
Michael Moore made Canadian Bacon in response to the Bush administration of the late 80s, early 90s, and the Gulf War against Iraq.
In Iraq! Ha!
He wanted to play with the idea of a US president being able to start a war with any country on Earth, even their closest ally. It was an over-the-top, satirical look at the military-industrial complex and international relations that somehow came true like a prophetic Simpsons reference. If you're wondering if it's possible for a war to break out between Canada and the United States, 1, go back to history class because it already happened. We burned the White House to the ground. We're f***ing crazy, man. And 2, check out social media for the most toxic takes from Canadians and Americans alike. It took some of these people no time at all to turn on their neighbors, which, after the disgusting behaviors witnessed throughout the pandemic, is not at all surprising. And yes, a lot of the dialogue from this movie seems prescient, but it's key to remember that most of that has to do with the timeless nature of warmongering and propaganda. Alright, it feels like things are getting a bit too politically charged, so let's wrap this up. If you're looking for some light entertainment that feels remarkably on the nose right now, if you're looking for a slice of 90s nostalgia with a heavy dose of John Candy, you gotta check this out. Because Canadian Bacon is a terrible movie that is absolutely worth watching. That's all, folks. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Why don't we just go up there with a strike force and knock out their infrastructure quicker than you can say collateral damage?
Because a war with Canada would be over in a matter of days. 72 hours after we invade, they're begging for a Big Mac.